Welcome all to the Lofi Podcast. Today, my guest is Colours and Clouds, otherwise known as Gary. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me on. It's a real honour to be here. I was quite shocked when I got your message through asking if I'd like to come on and be interviewed. So very happy to be here. Been listening to from day one. A couple of them I managed to catch on YouTube. But most of the time it's kind of like a listening on Spotify on my way into work and listening there. So yeah, really good.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Because whenever I would post little updates in the Alt Jazz server, I'd always see your reactions. You'd be active. You'd talk about the episodes, and it's a real encouragement to have active listeners like you, and then to have you along as well, just to talk about lo-fi, talk about music in general, and even just life. So,
yeah, good stuff. Yeah. Just really enjoyed every episode. There's always something to get out of them, either something that you say, which is a real good little nugget, or one of your guests will make a comment or bring an idea in. So yeah, really worthwhile listening and taking notes sometimes as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much. And I mean, people who listen into this episode hopefully will get some nuggets as well. And
let's hope.
Yeah, well, here, I'm sure some of these questions we have lined up, they're going to be... I mean, I can't relate with some of them, just with my age, but I'm sure you'll be able to bring some wisdom and understanding with your experience too.
Yeah, as you can see, I've got the greys in my beard, but yours is looking nice and black.
Yeah, well, the grey hairs are signs of wisdom as well.
Well, so they say. We will find out.
We will find out indeed. And well, so Gary, just to get started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself outside of lo-fi, who you are, what you do, any hobbies besides music production?
Yeah, so I was born in the 70s, as you've already alluded to. I'm a touch older than you. So born in the 70s, spent most of my childhood in the 80s, my teen years in the 90s. So, I mean, for me, they are the best decades, for music, 80s, 90s, 70s, you can't beat it. On the older side, let's say, but it's been great because, as an older producer, I was kind of, when I first started, was thinking, how am I going to be accepted in the community? What is it going to be like? Are there going to be a lot of youngsters? But I discovered a great community of people around the same age as me, life phase as me, with kids and that. So, it's been great to find and connect with other producers in their 40s, in their 50s. It's been brilliant. But what has also been really good is that, you younger guys that, some of the guys in their teens, 20s, 30s, they don't treat us like the old fools. Maybe behind our backs. Maybe there's a little bit of that behind our backs.
I can assure you we don't.
But it's great how, we're all different ages, but we've got the love of lo-fi music and producing music, and it kind of brings us together. So age isn't really a barrier. It makes no difference, which has been a great discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think in the lo-fi community, with people spanning such different age ranges, I think everybody has something to bring. And whenever we're sharing these ideas and doing collaborations, it really comes through in the music that we make. It comes to mind, I did a collaboration with, I'm sure you know, Greyware.
Yes. Well, I've done a few with him, yeah.
Yes, and hearing the guitar solo that he did in the collaboration, and whenever my dad first listened to it, and he grew up as a teenager during the 80s, and he could hear that influence coming through in the music, and he loved it so much. And so you can see where there's little bits from what people have gleaned in their own music interests as they grow as teenagers, and that comes through in the music you produce.
Yes, it's great. Whenever I've worked on a track with Greyware, he kind of seems to channel his inner Pink Floyd, and there's definitely some Pink Floyd influences going on in there.
100% for sure. And so you were saying you were listening to music from some older eras. Do you have any bands or artists that you could recommend to the listeners to check out?
Well, yeah, I think, a lot of the names that I listen to, relatively well known. I'm a big Bowie fan. He is definitely, an inspiration to me. Probably one of the most creative people ever to walk the planet. What he was doing lyrically and musically, and just redefining himself all the time. Just brilliant. So, from the 70s, 80s, 90s. I mean, he started in the 60s. He was writing music for 6 decades. It's crazy, really. But then, I'm a real 90s kind of Britpop, indie rock boy. So I love Manic Street Preachers, Stereophonics, Charlatans, Placebo, all of that kind of era. Embrace, Ash. Ash was from over in Northern Ireland, from what I remember. They were over there. So that was my era. That kind of, I guess, would be defined by the Oasis, Blur kind of. But I was never a massive Oasis or Blur fan. I liked them, but I liked the smaller bands that came along. That was my thing.
I mean, if I have to be honest, I haven't heard of a good proportion of those bands.
Oh, so you need to check them out.
Yeah, I'll have to check them out myself. But whenever I come to think of it and think of older genres of music, I feel that even in popular music, there's been a bit of a resurgence in terms of instrument use. I think there's been a lot more real instruments coming back again. Acoustic guitars, electric guitars. People are incorporating vintage synthesizers, even in what is mainstream at the moment. And it's almost coming full circle.
Yes, it is. And, I love my guitar music. That is what I grew up listening to. But I'm not a guitarist. And I've always struggled with guitar. I've attempted to learn a few times. I've got several guitars. And I'll have a go, but I just can't get it into my head. So I'm a keys player. I play keyboards, synthesizers, pianos. I can see the pattern there on the notes. So you've got the keys, you can see the pattern, but I guess I was just lazy and I didn't learn the fretboard, and that is the problem. Because when I talk to a guitarist about it, as we know you're a guitarist, and we can see from your background there, and when you learn your fretboard, you recognise those patterns, so you know where your fingers can go. You know different chords. You can play in different keys because you know the pattern for the chords. So for me, I couldn't get that. So. I love guitar music, and I try to collaborate with guitarists as much as possible, but I'm a real synth boy. I love the synths. So, I'm quite excited by the resurgence of, the vintage synths.
Yeah, and so I suppose you mentioning that you're a key player, you love synthesizers, that leads into our next question. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got into music, sort of your musical journey, and where you started to play an instrument and what instrument that was?
Well, I started playing at a really young age, and that was keyboards. I grew up in a house where my dad was a guitarist. He wrote songs as well. They never really shared them very much, but he wrote them. I have vivid memories of on a Saturday afternoon, my dad would set up his reel-to-reel recorder in the living room, and all of us kids would have to go and find somewhere to play quietly while he was recording. So I kind of grew up around music. He was always noodling on the guitar. It was always there. And the record player was always out. Both my mum and dad loved to listen to music. So I was brought up listening to music all the time. in my mind, music was on all the time. It was never off. I mean, that was probably, a little bit of an exaggeration, but yeah, I was obsessed with my parents' record player, and I would go and put their vinyls on, listening. There was all kinds of stuff going on. A lot of Elvis. There was some Duran Duran. In all the 80s stuff. So yeah, I just always had music. So I started playing keyboards at a young age. I was probably about 7, maybe even younger when I got my first keyboard. I wish that I was better than what I am, considering that I've been doing it for so long. But I live with what I've got. I've not got the greatest technical ability, but I kind of make up with that in enthusiasm. So, been playing for a long time and just took to the keyboards. Just really, really enjoyed it. Started playing by ear, and then had lessons, but it was all keyboard stuff. I wasn't really interested in the piano so much. So it was like the keyboardy side, the synths, and that. Since then I've kind of evolved a bit and played piano, but I'm kind of self-taught on piano. And I had the opportunity to play, live at quite a young age. So I was brought up in church, and for anyone that's brought up in church and can play a musical instrument, you tend to get brought into the church band at quite a young age. So I was kind of, from about 12 years old, was playing backup keys to the pianists in the band. I wasn't so much in a traditional church where we had an organ and choir. It was a full band. We had drums, we had guitars, saxophone, organ. There was like the Hammond organ, and there was piano. There was all sorts. So I got the opportunity, and the guys that I was playing with were really exceptional musicians. They were good. They liked to throw in key changes all the time. There was a lot of improvisation going on. They were all really into their jazz. So our church music when I was growing up was very jazzy. It was really good, and they'd be doing improvisations. The saxophone would take their turn, then the pianist would play a line, and that, it was brilliant, and it was kind of like a real learning opportunity to see these musicians play and get to be a part of that. It really helped with music theory, because they were doing key changes all the time, and they wasn't working off of sheet music. They were kind of doing symbols to say what key you were playing in, and you kind of had to know how many sharps there were in that key to know what their hand gestures were all about. It was it was great. So yeah, a lot of my music has been in the church growing up. I still play in church bands now, so I've been doing it for a long time, and it is great. It's the thing I really love to do.
Yeah, I can relate with the church band side of things, because growing up as well in a Christian household, my parents attending church, and then all of a sudden people hear that there's this guy that plays some instruments, and it's definitely, what's the way to put it? It helped me a lot learning how to wing things and play on the spot, because you could be sitting there, you'd be playing a song, and then they'd say, all right, we're just going to go straight into the next one. And little 14-year-old me on the bass guitar would be panicking. And so learning from that experience, I think, helped me definitely to grow as a musician. It's something, just playing live and can teach you so much more than just sitting and practicing a song over and over again in your room or sitting in front of your keyboard, I think.
Yes, definitely, 100%. And, I remember a friend that I kind of grew up with in my late teens and kind of 20s, 30s. And, he was like, it's like a gig every week almost. It's not a gig. When you're playing in church, it's not a performance. There's more to it than that. But it's almost like not many people can say they get to play live every week. And yet, I've been playing live near enough every week since I was 12 years old, and I'm a lot older than 12 now.
Yeah. But yeah, I have to say that whenever I was playing in those environments, what's the way to put it? It helps build confidence, I think, in whatever instrument you're playing, because of the way that things can suddenly change whenever you're playing in the live environment. And so that can translate a lot whenever you're making music and recording it yourself, because sometimes you want things to sound absolutely perfect, but having experience in that live environment, knowing that things can go wrong, it doesn't really bother you as much whenever you're recording a track and you have a slight mistake, because it's real, right? It's just the way music is meant to be, I think. I don't know if you agree or not in my thoughts.
I am far from a perfect musician. I like those beautiful mistakes. Was it Bob Ross, the painter, that used to talk about beautiful mistakes? I love those moments. Sometimes you have to re-record them. When it's a really bum note, you have to re-record that. You can't, or if you're a keys player like me, you cheat and just adjust the MIDI note. But, your guitarist can't get away with that so much. But yes, those slight out of time moments, it's what makes music human, isn't it? It's the things that don't go quite to plan. It gives that human element. It's the soul, isn't it? It's the life of the music.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, going slightly off topic, that kind of goes into the whole modern issue that we have with AI music, and where it's too perfect, right? It's trying to make this thing that is completely in time. There's no errors at all. And that's almost the way that you can catch it out whenever you're listening to it, because it sounds too good, too right. And also when you say there's the soul in it too, it lacks that human soul that gives it sort of life from the lived experience.
It does. You can hear that it hasn't got life in it. And what AI can't do is it doesn't know how to structure a song. It has no idea about that. There's nothing intelligent about AI. There really isn't. It hasn't got a clue. It just works on what you feed it. So, I know some people that have written some lyrics, and they're good lyricists, but they've not got any music knowledge as such. So they will put a load of lyrics into AI, get a song back that, in fairness, sounds amazing. It's like, how can a computer replicate all of that instrumentation, the voice, the nuances to the voice and all of that? But the song isn't structured in a way that you would expect a song to be structured, and it throws you off straight away. You expect there's going to be so many syllables on a line, the verse is going to be so many bars, the chorus so many bars. AI doesn't know all of that, and it just takes what you throw at it, creates something which is pretty amazing. It does blow me away, but there's no life to it. I would say it's not even music. There's no structure. There's no reality to it. So I am one, as many, and I've seen that you've reposted some stuff recently of your interview with Cucumelo when he was talking about AI and that, and also the difficulties that come along with that in terms of copyright issues and all that. I think it's going to implode. And honestly, I think that we are going to realise that actually we don't want AI art. We don't want AI music, because there is no life in it. There really isn't.
Mm-hmm. I entirely agree with you on that topic. But now maybe getting a little bit back on track where we were, sorry. I tangent a little bit too much.
No, it's fine. It's all good. I like naturally flowing discussions. It's the way a conversation should be, isn't it?
Yeah, it's real. It's organic. I suppose going back to what we were just talking about, it's got life in it, not like something that's robotic, like a computer made. Yeah. And so, well, going back to your roots in music and where you started. And so from playing the keys, how did this develop into music production? Like what inspired you to look into music production, and how did this journey go from there?
Well, I guess, like mentioned earlier, my dad had a reel-to-reel recorder. From what I remember, it was an 8-track recorder. So, you know, it was pretty good. This would have been in the 80s. And just seeing him record. And I remember he used to have these catalogues with all recording gear, all synthesizers in. And, you know, over here in the UK, I don't know if you have it over in the Republic of Ireland, but, you know, as a kids, we grew up and there was Argos, and you had the Argos catalogue. And at Christmas time or on your birthday, you'd be circling in the Argos catalogue everything that you wanted. Now, I was like that with my dad's recording gear catalogue. Apart from, I was never allowed to make a mark in it. You know, these things were pristine, but weekly I'd be looking through this catalogue, all of the gear. I want this, I want this, I want this. So from a young age, it was there. I probably started recording in my early teens, maybe early to mid-teens. Very basic stuff. There weren't any doors then. So my keyboard that I had, it had the functionality to be able to record, and I could record an 8-track. It would all be in the box MIDI. I could create a drum track. I could create all of the bits. So that was what I was doing, and then kind of got my first DAW when I was 16, and this is probably one that no one has heard of, and it was called Steinberg 24.
Right, never heard of it.
Steinberg obviously make Cubase, so people will be familiar with Cubase. Now, Steinberg 24 was a MIDI only, so there was no effects in it. There was no instruments within it. So it interacted via MIDI with the hardware, but you could record onto the hardware. And I was limited to the 16 channels that MIDI allowed you. So that was my first DAW. That was on the Atari ST. So that was going back some. That was my first DAW. I moved on from there to Fruity Loops, back when it was called Fruity Loops, and used that. I've been through all the DAWs. I then went on to Cakewalk. So people may be familiar, you know, Cakewalk kind of became a thing a few years ago. I think BandLab purchased them, and so Cakewalk was available as a free DAW for a while. They've now discontinued that, but back in the day, that was a competitive DAW. You know, you had Logic, you had Cubase, and you had Cakewalk. So I was using Cakewalk. That was when I first got introduced to VSTs. There was some effects in there. There was instruments in there. Cakewalk then became Sonar. I believe they were bought out by Gibson. I think they may have been bought by Gibson, and it changed the name to Sonar. And then I moved from Sonar to Reason, which again is another one which not many people seem to have heard about. But Reason is a great DAW. It was very much aimed at the electronic music market. At the time, it was all in the box. There was no VST compatibility at all. So it was all built in. But it was like working with hardware. When you wanted to patch something in, you had to press the tab key, and then there was leads from going from the instruments to effects. So it's a very visual, very much like using hardware. So I used that for many years. And then in about 2021, 22, I moved over to Ableton. And that is my DAW of choice now. I don't think I would move away from that. I love the workflow. For me, it works brilliantly.
Yeah, that's jumping from quite a lot of different DAWs.
Yeah, I get bored. I like to explore and try new things. So that's my problem.
Yeah, keeping things fresh, I suppose. It can help boost creativity as well.
It can help,
Yeah.
yes.
And so, I mean, for me in my musical journey, I think I only ever really went through three different doors. I started with Magic's Music Maker.
Yes, I'm familiar
Uh,
with it.
yes, after that, I then went to Presonus Studio One.
Yes.
Yes, and now finally I've settled with Logic Pro. Yeah, but just out of curiosity, with you having used many more DAWs than that, did you find much of a learning curve whenever you were going from one to the other, or was a lot of the information easily transferred?
A certain amount is easily transferred. I think it's just finding your way around the user interface, which gives you the greatest learning curve. Specifically, Reason, because of the way it works, because of the way it is very patching leads and stuff like that. That was quite a steep learning curve. To be honest, going from Reason into Ableton, it was a breeze. I think Ableton's UI is great. It's very easy to get along with. I had no issues whatsoever. In fact, you're saying about being fresh and sparking creativity. I probably had one of my most creative periods when I changed over from Reason to Ableton, because it was a new way of working and it just set something off in me.
Yeah. But I think the way you mentioned it there and how, like, yeah, there is a certain amount of things can be transferred over, will be helpful for people who are listening to this and are thinking of changing their DAW. Because I think that's one of the biggest fears that people have, that they're going to find it difficult, they're going to be back to square one. And I myself thought that whenever I switched over from Studio One to Logic. But in reality, it only took even 3 weeks at most before I could figure out how to do things visually. It was slightly different, but in principle, it does the exact same thing.
It does, and I went back to Reason has recently updated to 14, and so I tried that out, and I really struggled with it because just the workflow in Ableton is so good that to go back to that, even though I knew that was the DAW that I've been using the longest, I found it harder going back to Reason than what I did going from Reason to Ableton. But as they say, the best DAW out there is the one you know. So I don't think people should feel the pressure at all to change DAWs. If what you are using works for you, you know it well, and it does the job that you want it to do, stick with what you've got, And if you are thinking about trying, most of these companies give quite good trials, and just give it a go. Watch some tutorials online, give it a go, see if it works for you.
Yeah, I think that it's almost that there's this childish argument online that such and such a DAW is better than another. But exactly as you said, it's whatever DAW that helps get the ideas that you have in your head out for people to hear is the best DAW for you. In our list of little questions we have here, one of the ones you suggested, which I think would be very interesting to talk about, is finding our own sound in production, and then also how we can gain inspiration to continue making tracks. And I think the way that we find our sound in production can vary quite a lot depending on what our main instrument is. And so I think from you with your keys background, how did you find your sound, and maybe how can other people sort of apply the same steps that you took for them?
Honestly, it took years. As someone that was very much into guitar music but couldn't play guitar, I didn't know what music to make. And I would experiment with a lot of different sounds for years and years. I mean, honestly, years. I would say that I probably spent about 20, maybe 25 years of trying to record music and never finishing a single track on my own. So I would write music with friends, kind of like more of a band setting, and be able to finish it. But for my solo work, I just couldn't find my sound. I found it hugely frustrating, not quite knowing what to do. And I think, like a lot of lo-fi artists, especially the ones that you've had on the podcast, I found lo-fi during COVID. And, I was working from home most of the time, and I would just put it on in the background because, I didn't want to listen to ambient music, which I love ambient music, and I also produce ambient music. But while you're working, just ambient music's a little bit too low key. So I wanted something with a beat. I didn't want any lyrical content. So lo-fi was kind of like the perfect genre, and I was listening to it. At the time, I was actually trying to produce synthwave music, being, a child of the 80s and being into synths, I liked that sound, but I'm not a great fan of the synthwave drums. I don't like the big reverb drums. And so that kind of put me off. It was what I was going for, but, as I was recording the drums, I didn't like the sound. So discovered lo-fi. I thought, do you know what? I'm going to give that a go. And that is the genre that I've kind of settled on, and just trying to find my sound in that. And I started lo-fi music in 2020. Probably released my first track, I believe it was the end of 21. I'd have to look back, but I'm pretty sure it was November 21 I released my first track, and it sounds nothing like what my music sounds like now. Some would even say that's not lo-fi, and they would probably be right. When I listen back to it, it's not really lo-fi, but it will stay there as long as my music is online. It will stay there because, I'm very much a person that believes in the journey, and letting the journey speak for itself. This is where I was. This is who I am now. And in 10 years' time, you're going to see something different. So I think your sound naturally evolves, and I think your sound does naturally come from the instruments that the influences you have musically. So for me, lo-fi, I struggle sometimes in lo-fi in that at the moment it's very much an organic instrument heavy. You do see synths in there, but synths tend to be more of a background sound, maybe a counter melody, that kind of thing. But a lot of the labels are looking for organic sounds. I struggled for a while with the notion that the labels were looking for guitars specifically, and I think there was a time where the lo-fi sound was guitar heavy. There was a lot of guitars coming in, but I'm noticing recently that pianos seem to be coming through more, even with some of the many friends that I've made in the lo-fi community, which are mainly guitarists, have started using pianos more in their sound, which has been great to hear. And the electric piano, especially, seems to be featuring in a lot of tracks. So, I take that as an encouraging sign. It's good. I love guitars in lo-fi. Don't get me wrong. I do love that, and I really love the kind of folk hop sound, which I know is something that you work on and are involved in. I do love that sound. The acoustic guitar is probably my favourite instrument to listen to. I love it. But it makes me happy when I see the piano featuring more, and I'm kind of hoping that as time evolves, we might see synths kind of start dominating the lo-fi scene a little bit.
Yeah, and it's exactly where you mentioned about the journey. And I think that as time goes on, the sound that we're discovering will change based on what influences we have, even just life experience and things that can happen to us, and things that we see, things that we do, people we meet. They're all factors in producing that sound. Yeah, and so what you mentioned about you releasing your first track back in November 21, you were saying?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah,
Yes,
I've actually just got it open here on Spotify. I think it's Time Changes, if I'm
that is
correct.
correct. Yes.
Yes, and so like I'm thinking now about my first release and how there's one specific track on that album called Getting Over, I think. Or it could be wrong. There's one that has interlude in it. And listening back to that track, I dislike it so much. I think it sounds horrible. The mixing is terrible. There is no clear melody. But I think where you mentioned that just keeping it up there and to see yourself, who you were then and who you are now, that in itself can be an encouragement in you to help grow your sound and how you produce.
Yes, it definitely is. I listened. There's actually I think it was last year, I re-released Time Changes, but as I would record it now, if I was re-recording it, I found was quite an interesting project to work on. So I did, a more sleepy lo-fi version, which is kind of where my sound has landed at the moment, of that same track. I also recorded an ambient version of that track. And I got my friend Egrets, who Egrets kind of produces lo-fi, but also is very much into the electronic scene. He's produced some D&B stuff, all kinds of alternative dance music, and he did a remix for me. So yeah, that came out. I believe it was on the fourth year anniversary of the original release. Which was, I recommend to other producers to maybe give that a go. Go and listen to your first track and re-record it now and re-release it as you would do it now, and just see where that journey has taken you.
Yeah, I think that's something I might even try myself because my first lo-fi track called Birdsong, I'm hearing it in my own head now, and I've already started to imagine how I would change it, what instruments I would add, what instruments I would take away, and maybe that's a project to do over the next couple of weeks. So that goes to show even now, talking with other producers is another way that we can get inspiration.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, because just speaking to you is giving me this sense of motivation to go out and try something different and see what it sounds like.
Yes, I mean it's worth doing, and collaborating with other producers really helps you develop your own sound. I've worked with many artists, and I want to work with many more. That's something I keep wanting to do, is work with other artists, because I learn so much when I work with somebody else. They might notice something in my sound which inspires them, and I'll notice something in their sound that inspires me, and you kind of bounce off of each other and always learning. Yeah, I think we have to be teachable as well. We must be open to learning, knowing that we can always improve, and as we improve, that's defining our sound even more.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you on that. And so moving on to our next question we have. This one I personally can't relate with. So
I know what question it is then.
Yes, I know. So I'm going to have to ask you to do all the talking because I have zero experience in it. Well, maybe God willing in the future I will, but at this stage. So I'm just going to read it off because I'll probably end up messing up the words, not knowing how this actually works. But so you've written having a creative house and creating opportunities for your children. How do you find navigating all of this? So I'll hand it all over to you.
I think it is one of the most important things that we can do as creative parents. I write music. I play music now because I was inspired by my dad, who played guitar and recorded music. We always had music in the house. My parents encouraged us. I learned keyboards. My brother learned drums, and he's a phenomenal drummer. My sister, she kind of dabbled in a lot of different areas, creativity wise, and tried a few different things. And they was always encouraged us. They brought us our first instruments. They paid for lessons, and to be quite honest, they could probably have spent that money better elsewhere. Things were hard. I mean, we talk a lot nowadays. We talk a lot about the financial crash of 2008, but I remember there being a financial crash when I was a child. So in the 90s, there was a financial crash. And mortgages were a massive problem. People's mortgages went up really high overnight. People couldn't sell their houses because they had no equity in them whatsoever. The market just plummeted, and that affected my parents. They hid it very well from us. But as you grow older and you have those adult conversations with your parents, you kind of realize the sacrifices that they have made for you. And so they paid for lessons for years, and probably needed that money for other things. But I'm forever indebted to them, really. So as a parent myself, I'm a parent of 3 children. I say 3 children. 2 of my children are adults, 2 adult boys, or men as they are, and I have a 16-year-old girl who thinks she's an adult. So my kids are older now, but the one thing that we did was give them every opportunity that we could give them when they were growing up. So my wife paints, so we always had sketching and painting and other artistic activities in the house, writing music. You mentioned Magic's earlier as your first door. Well, that was the first door that I brought my son. So just to speak a little bit about my eldest son, he's just coming up 23 now. And here's a lot of the reason why I'm still making music. As we plow into our children, and as we give them things, that turns around and they give back. So my oldest son, he had a keen interest in recording music as well. He plays piano, plays really well. He now plays bass as well. So he learned how to record in a DAW. Magic's was his first, and then he went on to FL Studio. He's now using Cubase, but he was a lot of the inspiration to get me back into producing. So I mentioned for years I didn't finish anything, and I kind of given up. When you've got a young family, it's quite hard to find the time. So I didn't really have the time to produce a lot. So when I went back to finish a song, I was bored of it. Then I couldn't get back into it. But he showed a keen interest in music because he'd always been around it, and went to college to learn music technology at college. Thrived there. He'd be embarrassed for me to say it now, but I will say it anyway. When he went to college, he wanted to become a rapper. We'd never heard him rap before, but he wanted to produce his own rap music. Okay, go for it, son. If that's your dream, go for it. But while he was there, he discovered that he had a knack for recording soundtracks. He shone at it. He got noticed in his classes and got a real love of doing that. So he finished college. He went on to university where he studied music composition for film and games. He graduated with a first from that, excelling in music. But it was him getting into college and starting recording, and me hearing what he'd done, which then inspired me to start recording again. And then I found lo-fi. So, I kind of felt that I had many wasted years, but then I realized that actually I hadn't, because I ploughed something into my children that they then picked up on and have excelled in it themselves. My second boy, he's just coming up to 20. He's a phenomenal guitarist. He's just amazing. And we discovered that he is an absolute poet. Just writes the most beautiful songs. And he's using FL Studio now to record his own singer-songwriter type album. And I see my children are inspired. And my daughter, she's very artistic. So she's currently doing her GCSEs, which is what we have over here in the UK. And she's just done her art exam and that. And she's doing really well and hoping to go and do fine art at A level. And that's because we always had that. And for some parents, it's difficult to give those opportunities. I do understand that, especially if you're not artistic yourself. But schools don't give many artistic opportunities anymore. Certainly here in the UK, it's all about technology. It's all about science, maths, and English. So a lot of the arts is kind of like an add-on on the end. It's just the tick box that you've got to do to say that you've done it. And a lot of children, they don't have necessarily artistic parents to learn whether they actually have an interest in that. My wife works in a school, and last year she put on an art week, and so each class were given different tasks to do, and the whole time was spent just being artistic, learning about artists, and then copying their style to create their own art. And at the end of it, they had like a gallery night where the parents would come and see their art. Well, it was weeks, months after that one of the parents came up to my wife and said, "My son never really did art before. He never asked to, but now he won't stop drawing. We're having to constantly buy him new art equipment. And even now, it's a year since they've done it. He brings in pictures that he's done to show my wife what he's doing. His parents enrolled him in like art lessons on a Saturday morning. The smallest thing can ignite something in a child. And if we don't give them these opportunities, they might not realize what's inside of them. And, I think it's really important that we try our hardest as parents, or even if your friends have got children and you're able to impart something into them, it's important to give them an opportunity. If they show an interest in something, just give them that opportunity to move on in it and see if it's something that they fall into.
Yeah, just hearing what you've said there is it's making me emotional, hearing especially about that child that, your wife at her school is encouraged him to find this thing called art that he never did before. And now it's something that he loves and does all the time. Like I entirely agree with what you say, where schools nowadays are putting less of a focus on art and almost putting it in the back burner, treating it as a second-rate subject. Because in a local school here, my parents would know both the art teacher and the music teacher there. And they're always saying that they never receive funding whenever it comes to any meetings with the principal at the school, that any of the science teachers would get preference to any requests they have. And the arts are almost, they're treated like a second-rate subject. But in reality, maybe your child finds science great. Maybe your child is a linguist. But still at the same time, art, whether it be a visual form or in audio like music, it helps them grow as people. It might not be their full-time job. It might not be something that they do, but even as a hobby, and giving them the opportunity to explore just helps them to grow and become a more well-rounded person in general, I think.
Yeah, and I think everyone is creative, whether they know it or not. Maybe not everyone is creative artistically, but some people are creative in business. Some people are creative in teaching. I think we've all had that teacher that just managed to teach a subject in a way that just brought that subject to life for you because they had a creativity in that. I believe that creativity is part of our DNA. It was put in there. As a Christian, a man of faith, I believe that God created us. God is a creator, and He created us in His image. And to be created in His image means that we've got those same kind of attributes. As creativity is part of who we are, and we're not living the full human experience if we're not creative. It is what we were created to create. It is my personal belief.
I would entirely agree with you on that point where you say that we were created to create. I can see that it's almost where we are imitating the Creator and the abilities that He's given us. As well, being a Christian, where you say that we are made in God's image, and one of His attributes is that He is the Creator, and we can become almost a replica in that way. Not putting us at the same level as God, not that we are, but He gives us that ability and He grants us that ability, and we can use it in the life that we have for good. We can use it for benefits for others. And so it's, talking to someone who has a same understanding and a same belief in that subject, it's great to hear.
It is good. And there are a few of us in the Lo-Fi community, that have that same belief system. So, it is really great when you find someone else that is kind of on the same wavelength.
Yeah, and I think whenever you have that idea that with whatever abilities you're given and that you're doing it for the benefit of the other and not for yourself, it makes that creative passion so much more enjoyable. Because this leads into our next question and the definition of success. I think if we define success as how much money we make, how many followers we have, it all becomes about us. But whenever it's what we can give back to the community, how we can help make someone's day even a little better, and we flip it on its head and what some people would have where it's all about them, it makes it enjoyable. It makes it stress-free. There's no pride in it, and it's selfless, I think.
Yes,
I don't know what your thoughts are.
Myself. Yeah, I couldn't have put it better myself. You're exactly right. It's a selfless act. I think as human beings, and particularly as artists, we define ourselves by what we do. And when we get acceptance, when someone loves our track, or when we see those streaming numbers go up, we find our identity in that, and it kind of defines who we are. But then when a track doesn't stream very well, and you're getting a handful of streams, and I experience that. I get one track, it comes out, and I'll get 30,000 streams in a number of weeks. Brilliant. And then I'll get another track that doesn't even hit 10. And if I was to define myself and my own identity in how people perceive my music, how the world would say that's successful, then I'm going to have a lot of disappointment. I'm going to be like a yo-yo, up, down, all the time. I'm not going to know what my identity is because I'm putting it in what I do. So, I think it's important that, we all define success ourselves. And I love your definition there of, making someone else's day, it given to someone else. That's really important. When I first started releasing music, I didn't plan on releasing music. I only released music because that was the only way I knew I would ever finish a track. If I didn't set a goal to release it, it would never get complete. So I was never about chasing numbers, chasing streams, chasing money. It was always a hobby. But, the releasing the music, that's forcing my hand. Don't get me wrong, I get tempted to look at the numbers. I do look at the numbers. I get disappointed. I get elated. But I have to constantly remind myself why I make music. And so I set some metrics for myself of how I define success. First off, did I finish the track? If I finished the track, it's successful and I've released it, because I'm not going to release something that I don't like myself. So if I've finished and released it, straight away it's a success. The second thing I look at is, did I have fun making the track? I make music for fun. So if I didn't have fun making it, it wasn't a successful track. My third metric I look at is, did I learn something whilst making the music, or did I try something new? You know, I think we should always be pushing ourselves. So I will try maybe something slightly different. I might use a different synthesizer. I might go away from using presets and do my own synthesis, create my own sounds from scratch, you know, things like that. So experimentation, just learning something, pushing myself. So yeah, if I've finished, released, had fun and learnt something, that's a successful track to me.
Yeah, those are definitely really good criteria to have. And I think it's, yeah, as you say, not defining yourself or having your identity in numbers, in streams or anything like that, but based on what you say. And people will have different ideas, but the main thing is to, I think, be selfless in your art form and not let it define who you are.
That's right, yeah, 100%.
Yes. And so, Gary, you've said so many words of wisdom in this interview. I'm sure so many people will be able to gather little nuggets out of it that will help them in their journey. But before we wrap up, do you have anything that you would like to share with the Lo-Fi community that you think will help them grow to be better musicians?
I think to touch on something that, you know, we've already talked about, and that is the lo-fi community. I think it's really important to be in community, and certainly being in community is something that has helped me grow as an artist. You know, if I'm honest, maybe if I didn't find different communities within lo-fi, I might not still be making music, because it's the encouragement from other producers, getting to work with other producers, that really helps. So I think that's the one word of wisdom. You know, we weren't created to be alone. We weren't. You know, society nowadays tells us we don't need anyone else. We can do everything on our own. You can do. You don't need to work with other people. You don't need this. You don't need that. It's all about individualism, and especially, you know, I think more in the Western society. You know, I think you know, a lot of the rest of the world has got it right. You know, if you look into Asia and Africa and South America, those kind of places where, you know, there is more of a community spirit. But certainly in the Western world, we've gone well away from that. And, you know, society tells us, media tells us we don't need anyone else. Government tell us we don't need anyone else. And, you know, that is a lie. We was never made, you know, in the Bible, it says it's not good for man to be alone. And that's true. We were made for community. So get in a lo-fi community. If you're not communicating with other producers, that is the best way to grow and learn and you know, just find friends. You know, I found genuine friends in the community. Everyone who I've met has been super friendly, super helpful. You know, some of the communities, you know, it's mainly on Discord. Some of the communities are label based, and you know, there's some great conversations happening there. But I find with a lot of the label based lo-fi Discord servers, you know, a lot of it would be around that label, and I kind of understand that. But there's some great kind of not label based communities out there which are just groups of musicians, not all lo-fi artists, different artists that just learn from each other, have a laugh together. One that really sticks to mind is Will Hatton. He's a YouTuber. He's got an inspired by YouTube that he does, and he creates music in all kinds of genres, but he has an inspired by Discord server. It's not label affiliated. It's not affiliated with anything other than Will Hatton, and that's where I have met most of the people that I would call friends now in the lo-fi community, and it's been brilliant when I've needed advice. There's some times, we all get lonely at times, even us adults and even us married adults, and that we have moments of getting lonely, but just being able to chat with people online who I see as, real friends, so that is my real word of wisdom. Just get into community. It's the best thing.
Yeah, I agree with every word you just said. Community is one of the best things I love about lo-fi. I've said it before in other episodes. It's almost as if it's one big family. We're able to go to each other with questions, with requests, anything at all. And it doesn't even have to be about lo-fi. Whenever we build these genuine friendships, we get to know these people as other human beings. And I believe that's one of the things that I love about this podcast, is that it helps the community see who people are behind these different lo-fi names. And that, like us, we're just other human beings as well, just like them. And we all have everyday lives. We all have struggles. But just being there for each other is one of the best things there is.
There is. And that makes me think, you say about this podcast being really great at getting to know. And, you've had guests on which I've communicated with lots, and, I would class them as my friends. Some of the guests you've had, others that I've not really known, but you get to know. So it kind of gets me thinking, you need to do a takeover episode where you get someone to interview you, and we find out who you are.
Yeah, that's a thought, although it's quite a nerve-wracking one too. I'm not sure what it would be like to be on the other end. So.
Well, I think you need to find out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. Maybe in the future. But here, thank you so much for this interview.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and likewise here, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, talk about lo-fi, talk about life, just everything. And I hope that in some way or another, that when this interview goes out there, it'll be an encouragement to whoever listens to it.
Yes, let's hope.
So here, Gary, all the best and see you around.
Thank you very much.